Really useful. I mean, I find commissions, even sort of on any scale, really useful impetuses to make things, basically.
So the Talkies commission was incredibly useful to me. I had completed a short film a few months before, and I was playing with certain ideas and maybe considering going on to a feature film, which probably would have been a bit too early. And the commission was great because it provided a great brief, a really interesting brief, and a framework of great people to bounce ideas off.
I don't think suburbia is too much of a challenging theme because it's where I live and where I've grown up and where I have quite a lot of memories. I think a lot of people live in suburbia, even when you're in London, in some sense. And that feeling of being in the city and yet not in the city is interesting and has, sort of interesting results.
I thought the theme was great. Luckily, I mean, I'm sort of from the suburbs, the deep suburbs of North London, and so I'd been playing and toying with lots of ideas that were based in and around that kind of area. So for me, it fitted a lot of my ideas perfectly. And as a theme, it's tight enough to feel creative, but loose enough to feel like my ideas could sort of play around in it.
I think personally, my ideas sort of shifted over the process. But initially for me, it was just sort of about the absurdity of suburbia and sort of, again, I grew up in a small little town in between Reading and Basingstoke, and it felt like a very sort of curtain twitching sort of place where, everybody's sort of being very nosy about next door neighbours and what's going on in the garden next door, and it's sort of, Samuel and I sort of took that idea of looking at being voyeuristic into other people's problems and the idea of that, and then that sort of evolved into our idea. So it was a good nucleus as a platform to start, but again, it's sort of, I think what the brief does is it doesn't sort of hold you accountable. That has to be completely this sort of thing. It just lets you sort of then take this nucleus and run with it, which is quite fun.
Yeah.
12 weeks.
Really? I wasn't aware that I did it in 12 weeks. I think that's quite impressive.
Oh, very helpful. Well, because my artistic process is kind of very laid back, and so having a set deadline that I had to get it done by was really helpful, because otherwise I'd probably still be editing now, several months on.
There was quite a tight constraint time-wise for the short, but I'm sort of soon finding out that people work to whatever deadline you put in front of them with sort of more or less grumbling.
12 weeks, so that's, what is that, 3 months? Not as hard as I thought it could be.
It was very useful. I think it's a great initiative to be able to sort of offer an amount of money to a filmmaker to actually support an idea that they've been wanting to make for ages, but also as well, I think the amount of time that you give them really sort of pushes them to make something and not get too lost in the process too much. So then you definitely have to sort of deliver something, which is actually very helpful, I think, for me anyway.
It's been very helpful because since I first approached Talkies a few years ago as a high school dropout with no real idea of what I wanted to do apart from that I liked films, Talkies, well, it says it in the name, Talkies Community Cinema, was a really helpful community for me to be part of, and everyone has been really supportive, which is invaluable, really, especially as a young, lost person.
Having a mentor for the shoot was great. Ian was invaluable. He looked at the script at a very early stage and gave me sort of very broad notes at that stage, nothing to kind of pull the rug from the idea, but great notes at that stage. And he was able to come on both shoot dates and was extremely helpful at that point, giving a sort of guiding voice and even shot suggestions, which made it into the final edit, which were great. And also at the edit stage, he provided me with copious notes, which each and every one actually were great. So Ian was fantastic.
Advice, do it. Just do it. It's going to help you.
I think my advice would be just to apply, basically. I felt like the whole process was very friendly and unintimidating and open to any kind of idea or any kind of way of approaching the theme. So I would say if you're creative or you're at all excited or inspired by whatever brief it is, I'd just say do it.
And I think the other piece of advice would be not to get it right, but just get it in. Because my initial idea changed hugely from what eventually made it onto the screen. So there was quite a condensed and compressed and accelerated development stage that was really, really helpful. So even if you don't think it's perfect, especially if you don't think it's perfect, just get it in.